Hello everyone. Good morning. Good morning to the folks joining from the US and good evening to the rest of us joining from the eastern part of the globe. Hope you're all well and thank you all for joining this webinar on ServiceNow ATF Advanced Analysis, ROI and Demo. I'm Kavi, your host for the day. I head marketing and thought leadership for ServiceNow practice at Aspire Systems. We have two other speakers joining me. Stephen Makowski is a ServiceNow technical consultant at Aspire Systems. He's based out of Dallas, and he has a strong development background, and he's currently specializing in ServiceNow ITSM and automated testing. Our second speaker for the day is Kritika Shanmuga. She's a ServiceNow lead developer with around 8 years of experience, and she specializes in ServiceNow development and testing. Steve, there is a background noise. Can you please?
Oh, sure.
Oh, all right. Thank you. So both Steve and Kritika are working in ServiceNow development projects day in, day out. So what you're going to hear from them is they will share their experience on ATF and how it improved their daily operations. Before we begin the session, I would like to give a quick introduction about Aspire Systems. Aspire is a 3,000 plus employee organization, and we have 150 plus active customers. Our core DNA was software, is software engineering, and we have been in this space for almost 2 decades now, and we have separate practices and center of excellences for cloud, digital services, testing, development, and infrastructure and application support. As you can see in the map in the slide, we have presence across the globe. We have offices in the US and in Mexico for the North American region. And we have UK offices in UK and Netherlands in the Europe, and we have a development center in Poland for the European region. And we have our APAC headquarters in Singapore, and we have our largest development center in India, and we have offices in the Middle East regions as well. We are a CMMI level 3 organization, and we have ISO certifications on 9001 and 27001. There is a proud achievement Aspire has done over years is that we have been recognized 9 consecutive times as best place to work for by GPW Institute. Some of our accolades mentioned in the slide are Technology Fast 500 for APAC, and we have been rated by Forrester as one of the top continuous testing service providers. As you can see, testing and development is in our DNA, and we have been in this business for past 2 decades. So what we are trying to present here is through our experience, what we learned, and how ServiceNow's ATF is improving our development practice when it comes to ServiceNow. We are a bronze services partner for ServiceNow, and we are exhibiting for the 4th time in a row at Knowledge 19. Please do visit us at booth 622 to say hello if you are in K19. With further ado, let's move on to our agenda for today's session. There is a particular reason behind choosing this topic for this webinar before Knowledge 19. Over these, after ATF has been released, we understood from many of our customers and prospects that there hasn't been much of an awareness around the ATF usage and the benefits. So we wanted to do this webinar to help ServiceNow users utilize this feature and make their upgrades and releases much faster. And I'm sure there will be sessions in the Knowledge 19 about ATF. So if you are, if you're around in Knowledge 19, you can always attend those sessions to understand what ServiceNow is offering, what they have in their roadmap for ATF. So let's look at the agenda. So we will cover an overview on the ATF, and then I will hand over the session to Kritika, She will take over the need to use ATF, and then how ATF simplifies ServiceNow upgrades, and then she will hand over it to Steve, and Steve will cover the ROI, and Steve has an amazing comparison of automating your coffee making with ATF. So he will give you the demonstration, and then we'll discuss the advantages, disadvantages, and conclude the session. So once we conclude the session, we will take up questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please drop in the questions window, and we should be able to answer your questions. If you don't hear back, in the session, we will definitely ensure that we will reach out to you. We will send the answers to you through mail, and we will even set up meetings with you if needed. So let's move on to the first slide, ServiceNow's ATF overview. So basically, why ServiceNow introduced a ServiceNow automated test framework? So they wanted to automate these slow and complex and resource-intensive manual testing processes, and they also wanted to reduce the risk associated with the manual testing processes and resolve their customization issues. So these are the basic needs to introduce ATF in ServiceNow, and by doing so, they were able to reduce a lot of time for the development folks when they are implementing ServiceNow and when they are upgrading to a newer version. So those are some of the things that are primarily being the reason for the ATF feature. And here are some of the 5 points that we always advocate to our customers why they need to use ATF. It's an out-of-the-box feature. That's the first and foremost important point. So you don't have to do any customizations. It's already there. You just need to use it. And the second point is that it can be used to conduct unit testing and end-to-end testing. You can also use ATF to test both server side and client side. And ServiceNow is very strong in making improvements to the ATF feature in each and every release. So you can expect them to resolve the major improvements that you need, or the major issues that you face in the ATF feature in their upcoming releases. So that's a positive sign, and ServiceNow is very strong in improving their features. So you have new features added every release. And the best part is no additional licensing costs. So they don't have any license cost associated with ATF. So all you need to do is just use the plugin, just use the ATF feature that is already available in your instance. So with this brief overview, I would like to hand over the session to Kritika. Kritika will cover the usage of ServiceNow ATF and the architecture and so on and so forth. Over to you, Kritika.
Thank you, Kavi. So let's start with why use ServiceNow ATF. As we all know, unlike manual testing, automation saves time and money, and thereby it reduces human error without any manual intervention. So ATF is designed and maintained by ServiceNow. ATF is just a plugin, and once you activate the plugin, you can start to use ATF right away. ATF covers both client-side and server-side testing. For instance, opening a form, setting up field values, or submitting a form can be considered as a client-side testing, whereas any record action like record insert, update, delete, or even impersonation of a user can be considered as in server-side testing. ATF is designed in such a way that both technical and non-technical person can create tests in ATF without much effort, and it is very easy to use. ATF allows us to customize some of the out-of-box features, but it has been restricted to server-side testing as of now. We hope that the customization scope will be extended in the future release. Best of all, ATF is free, and no tools or no additional software is required. Moving on to ATF Architecture Diagram, first and foremost step in any testing would be understanding the functionality of an application. So once the tester is well versed with the functionality of the application, they can derive multiple test scenarios. The test scenarios can be further broken down into multiple test cases, and test cases are the collection of test steps or execution steps. Keeping this in mind, ATF has come up with this components. As you can see here, I would say test is the most important component here, which is the sequential collection of test steps. ATF gives us a wide range of test steps, starting from form testing to service portal testing. We can test record producer, service catalog, and even REST APIs. We have a test template. I would say test template is like a reusable component, because for any test case, the most common step would be opening a form, setting field values, and submitting a form. These three steps are going to be like stable for almost all the test cases. In this case, we can club these three test steps as a test template, and we can reuse the test template wherever it is required. We have test step configuration, which is the actual action which we take to validate any testing. Last but not least, we have test suite, which is the most interesting component here. As you can see, test suite can contain another test suite as a child test suite, and or else it can contain a test, or it can contain both. Basically, test suite is the logical grouping of both test suite and test case. Let's take incident module as an example. For an incident module, we can come up with multiple test scenarios, and those test scenarios can be converted into test using automated test framework. And we can club those test case as an incident test suite. Once we have this in hand, let's consider if you are making a functionality change, or if you are making a code change or a logic change on top of the existing incident module, and you want to ensure that the new change which has been added is not affecting the existing functionality. In that case, we have the test suite in hand, and we can run the test suite. With the result, we can ensure that the existing functionality is not affected by the newly added functionality. So a user can manually run the test or a test suite by using run test button, which is available in ATF, or test suite can be scheduled. So if you are leaving your office at 5 o'clock in the evening, and you can schedule the test suite to run at 6 p.m. When you come back the next day, you will have the result in hand, and in case of any failure, you can start to work on it actually without any delay. Moving on to the roadmap of ATF, ServiceNow introduced ATF in Istanbul version with minimum features, like they have covered the client and server-side testing. They gave form testing and for client side, and record insert option impersonation and for server side. In Jakarta, they have added two major features, which is a service catalog testing and REST API testing. In Kingston, they did not have much functionality added, but they came up with a rerun test, failed test cases in the test suite. Whereas in London, they came up with much more new features, starting from application navigator testing, where we can test our module visibility or application visibility, and whitelist client errors. For example, when you are running your test cases, in case your browser is showing a console error. Previously, it was failing the test case, but they overcome this particular defect in London, and those kind of failures can be whitelisted, and we will be able to add that in our warning list. Screenshot timeout interval has been can be modified in London version. Negative assertion testing can be done in London version, and most important thing is service portal testing. So, but it has been restricted to service catalog and service forms. In Madrid, they have introduced two cool features, which is parameterized testing. Using parameterized testing, we can test a particular test scenario using different test data. So we can ensure that our functionality is working properly with different inputs. We have custom UI testing or custom UI step, which is the most expected feature starting from Istanbul. So using this step, we can test the UI macro, UI pages, and our service portal pages. To support this custom UI step, we have page inspector. Using page inspector, we can identify the UI components of the UI page or the portal page. With this, I would like to conclude that ATF continues, or ServiceNow continues to mature ATF in each release, and if you feel that this particular feature is not available in ATF right now in your instance, we can always be sure that it will be introduced in the further releases. Moving on to mitigating upgrade risk with ATF. So, as we all know, upgrade is going to be a tedious process, and in case of manual testing, it is going to consume more time and effort. So ATF plays a major role here, and when you are going for an upgrade, we can have our test scenarios ready, which will reduce considerable amount of effort and time. Since there is a minimal manual intervention, we can avoid the human errors as well. So if you are going for an upgrade, any major release, first we have to come up with test scenarios, convert those things into test cases. This particular step can consume some effort, but this is going to be a one-time effort. Once this is completed, we can run the test cases and keep the test results ready. The ATF will store the test results for you, and we can go for an upgrade. Once the upgrade is completed, we can rerun the test cases, and we can compare the test results with the previous test result which we have. And in case of any deviation or in case of any test case failure, we can find out that there is a bug or there is a deviation in the functionality, and we can resolve the same. With this, I would like to I would like Steve to take over from here. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Kritika. So I'm going to continue by first talking about automation as a whole, and then talking about the benefits of automation, then specifically within ServiceNow's development cycle, and then we'll continue with a live demo before getting to the advantages and disadvantages. So automating making coffee. I mean, hopefully by now, at least people from Texas to maybe the East Coast might have already had their cup of coffee for the day. So I thought this was an appropriate example. So on the left and right, we have two different methods of making coffee. Actually, before that, let's talk about automation in general. Automation in general can be defined as delegating tasks to a machine to do. These tasks will generally be kind of boring, menial, and definitely repetitive, which is generally why we don't want to be doing them. So testing can be the same way, and also making coffee. So as I said, we have two different methods: French press versus coffee maker, versus like a generic pod coffee maker. I'm not going to name the brand here, but the important and arguments of which makes a better cup of coffee aside, definitely the automated version will be better. So let's take a look at the methods. So in the French press, everything has to be done manually. I mean, you have to make sure you fill a kettle with water. You have to set your cup. You might even have to grind your coffee. Everything has to be measured out, poured, and waited for, steeped down before you can enjoy. In a given cycle of making a French press coffee, it'll take maybe about 9-10 minutes. You might have between 8 to 10 steps. On the other hand, you have a pod coffee maker, which is way simpler to do in terms of the task that us as human beings have to complete. You might have to fill the water reservoir, maybe it might already be filled, but for the most part, you just insert your pod, insert your cup, press the button size, and just wait till it's done and enjoy. So in this case, total steps, you might have 5, 3, depending on how much preparation you did in the beginning, with a total time of about 1/3 of what it would take for a French press. Considering when you compare both, and if you make 1 cup of coffee per day, you'll find that with a French press, you'll probably spend about 56 hours doing it, with a total of 2,092 actions you might have to take over the course of that year. On the other hand, with the pod coffee maker, if you make 1 cup a day, you'll probably spend about 18 hours doing that for a total of 1,825 steps. All in all, you've saved about 36 hours, which amounts to almost a full work week where you can go on vacation or I guess even make more coffee if you wanted to, and it's plenty of time. For ATF, though, the reason why it's extremely able to ATF is because you can think of the French press as manual testing. And for the pod coffee maker, you can kind of think of the automated tests as the pod. The pod is pre-made. It's already ready to go. All you need to do is just press the button and, check out the results. So okay. So as far as ROI of ATF in general, manual testing will generally take less time for maintenance and tests. You might take a little bit more time to set up, but where it really kind of ATF really makes up for the time is when you actually run the tests, and we'll see this quite soon. So ServiceNow has 2 methods for test management. We have ATF and the test management modules. Test management is primarily used for documentation, while ATF is for automated testing. Both allow documentation, but only ATF can serve as the executor of those tests. So that's also like a double function. So the reason why you'll save a lot of time is because automated testing is done by a computer. It'll be more consistent. In most cases, it'll be quicker. As a person creating and running tests, you might have to go back and forth and redo things, so that'll take extra time. And as of course, less time means less billable hours, which means less cost. But it's a lot easier to kind of present this, and this is also, in addition, will give you a good chance to see, if you haven't seen how ATF works in ServiceNow, to check that out. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Okay, so for this demo, I've made a couple tests, both in ATF and through the test management. So for this particular test case, we have the following user stories, which are listed above here. But for both cases, both automated and manual, we're going to run the same steps. We're going to kind of log in as an ITL user. We're going to make sure that they can see the incident module. We're going to make sure that they can see the create new option under the incident module. We're we're going to go there, we're going to set field values, and we're going to validate the field values. There's a minor customization that was done, so in which the location field was added, and whenever you add a caller, it's supposed to auto-populate. So we're going to validate in both instances that the field has been auto-populated. And last but not least, we'll submit the form. So moving forward, I'm just going to demonstrate this by having a little little race between manual and automated testing. So I'm going to start this up, and right now we have manual test creation. The person's starting to access the test management module. So that's been moved up to the left corner, so we can see the real important thing here, which is ATF. ATF, as we mentioned earlier, is easy for both technical and non-technical personnel to use. For the most part, if you've used ServiceNow, you can use the ATF with almost no problem. Creating tests is just like creating any other record. Anything involving automated testing will be under the Automated Test Framework application menu. So right now, what we're doing in the ATF is we're creating a new test, which is as simple as filling out your name, the name of the test itself, and a brief description. Now, while this is being filled out, manual testing is almost the same in terms of recording, but it's a little bit more complicated in terms of management. It's a great module to use, but again, you can execute any tests, and in order to record results, you have to create a whole bunch of other records manually as well. So that's also kind of another issue. So now that we've created a test, we can go ahead and add test steps in ATF. Again, it's a matter of selecting which test steps you want and configuring them. So whenever you create a new test step, it'll give you an option it'll give you a menu to choose from which kind of test steps you want. Again, as we mentioned, we have server-side tests, UI tests. You can write your own custom test steps and configurations. We can test the application manager, application navigator, as we're doing right now. Configuring is also fairly easy for pretty much any user. So we can grab things directly from our instance by reference. For example, we want to access a certain button from the application, a certain module from the application menu. So we can actually search for that within the instance by reference, click on that, and then add it. So I'm just going to let this go. Oh, so another word about test templates really quickly. So test templates, and they're not being used here, and I'll explain a little more why. Yeah, test templates make this way easier. Again, you could set up your test templates separately under the test templates module. Basically what you can do there is you can add all the test step configurations in the order which you want to do. As Kritika mentioned, for actions that are repetitive and generally used across multiple tests. So I'm actually going to fast forward through this a little bit because it's we've got three more test steps to go. Oh, wait, we're almost done. Where are we? Oh, actually, so one interesting thing is, so one nice thing about ServiceNow's test ATF is the use of input and output variables. So input variables are basically what you put in. So that's like what's being configured here. Output variables, on the other hand, are what the test outputs. For example, if you impersonate a user or create a record, the output variable would be that user or user that's being created, impersonated, or the record that's being created. The nice thing about that is you can use these in subsequent steps. So in this, what's going on right here is we initially filled out the caller field previously to one of the users that's built into the system. So what we did was, by doing that, we were able to use the little bomb icon that you could see there, and then grab that person from the step and put them directly in, in any information that's tied to their record, like their location or like that, and then put that in. So let me just let this finish up. I think it's almost done. Great. So ATF test creation is done. Manual testing is still going on, so now we're just going to go ahead and run the ATF test. So whenever we run an ATF test, especially in UI, we have to do it within a browser, a client test runner. So the client test runner will basically be a tab that allows you to execute your UI tests. So UI tests, as we'll see, let me just run this, and that's the test status. UI tests are run exactly as if you're pointing and clicking within your instance. So right here we have the navigation in the execution frame we have the application navigator, and that's being used to check to make sure things are there, and then eventually it's going to click on it. Your test step status will be listed above. Right now we're kind of, I think, on step 3, where we are filling in the data. As you can see, after we filled in the car, location was already pre-filled as well. So that's cool. So once it's done, test runner can stay where it is, and what it'll do is it'll wait for another test until you're ready to throw another at it. Once you're done, you'll come to a screen like this where you have a status. It'll tell you if your test passed on a high level or if it failed, and it'll allow you to go see the results. So before I'm going to just pause this and go to the results. So once you're in the test step results itself, during the test, especially if it's the UI, they'll have taken screenshots of your UI at every stage, every test, at the end of every test step. So if a test fails, or if you just want to happen to see what the UI looked like for black box purposes, or just UI pixel-to-pixel testing, you can do that. So if you manage your attachments, you can download, and then so this is a screen. This is the screen that we were seeing earlier, right at the beginning. We were trying to look at the navigation. Furthermore, moving down, you'll have your test steps with the individual statuses, as well as a summary of what happens. You'll have test logs that'll tell you what happens at each individual step. Any page loading, any client errors that might happen, and then additionally test transactions, any URLs that were accessed, APIs that were queried, will be available to you here. The nice thing about this is it's all done automatically for you. There's nothing that you have to do, and if there's an error, it's really easy to point out exactly where this is. And these records are actually attached to the test themselves, so you can come back and see them whenever you need to. So so going back to the little manual versus ATF race that we're having right here. So we're pretty much done with ATF, and I moved the manual testing is moving to the side, so we can let that run while I finish up talking about the execution times. So while that's still running, let's take a look at the times. For manual testing, surprisingly here, we had a setup time of 6.5 minutes over ATF, which was 5. There's a couple reasons for this. ATF, once you get used to ATF, it'll actually be fairly intuitive and easy to use. In general, manual testing, depending on what kind of documentation software you're using or what the workflow is, manual should take longer. But if you're using specifically the test management modules from ServiceNow versus ATF, you'll have a bit of a different, it might be a different experience. Test runtime, we have 5 minutes for manual testing versus 1.5 minutes for automated. That was rounded up. That was actually like 1 minute and 15 seconds. With a total execution time of a total test time of 11 minutes and a half just for between creation and running that test just once for manual, as opposed to 6.5 for automated. So while those numbers aren't exactly big, let's say you have 100 tests that are similar. So you might spend 500 whole minutes on 506 minutes total for the manual tests versus 150. So you're saving about 70% time by using ATF in this case. So, and this may vary in depending on the complexity and the amount of tests that you have. Also, there's a variety of settings that you can use in order to prevent ATF from being a little bit slow. So, like I mentioned, the screenshots that it takes for UI testing, you can turn those off. You can You can turn this off. You can only have it when it fails, so it kind of speeds up the process a little bit. Those will be under the automated testing framework administration properties. So you'll be able to, first of all, turn it on and off. That's actually important, and that's actually one of the best parts about ATF is just it's turning it on and off as easy as clicking the button and saving the form. But you can manage your screenshots, UI capture data, and all that good stuff. So let's see, I got 10 minutes. So moving on to something back really quickly to the video to this. Another thing that could possibly affect like your test runtime is parameterized testing. Parameterized testing is actually really good if you want to declutter your tests. Previously, it was the case where if you wanted to do the same test that we just did, where we fill someone's name in and the location, auto-populates, but you want to do that with like maybe 12 or 11 different, 10 different users, to see if all of them will auto-populate as expected. Previously, you would have to copy the entire test and then reconfigure just the one thing. So you basically just have 10 tests there. With the parameterized testing, and this is really, really easy to get up and running. It's almost like creating your normal the normal tests, except that when you create it, you just enable parameterized testing. What this will do is this will allow you to set your parameter definitions. For example, like I'm going to impersonate a different person every time, or a different user, and then it allows you to configure your test data run sets. So, for each test run, I can configure a different user to put in, to auto-populate the location, and a different person to log in as. The only caveat to this is within this, it doesn't run like nested, so you can't select one person and then for each one person login is, and then under that person you put the person in the form. You have to make separate records where it's a one-to-one kind of deal. But so now that we've talked about that, I'm going to talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of using ATF. Sorry, just really quickly, time savings over time. As I mentioned, like this is just for one run, one creation. So you might have some some time where there's a little bit of downtime, but overall, eventually you might go back and make modifications. So you'll notice that as you do that, the gap will increase from the initial makeup and lag. Furthermore, instance upgrades, as Kritika mentioned, are very important for ATF. When you have an instance upgrade, you're going to have to check everything. ServiceNow will be modifying out-of-the-box features, so your customizations may or may not apply. So when it comes to regression testing, this is extremely important since you're going to have to run through everything, and that's where you're going to see the greatest amount of time saved there. And as we all know, time saved is money saved. So advantages and disadvantages. I'll go with the bad news first. It's not a comprehensive testing solution yet. They haven't gotten 100% code coverage as of now. So previously, UI pages and UI macros were not available up until just now, and even then, the UI custom UI testing is still limited to. I think you can test pretty much any item on a custom UI, but the actions in which you can interact with that UI are only set to like 4. You can click on one, you can assess the value. I mean, that's actually sufficient for most use cases. But that's probably the only issue. Other disadvantages can feel a little bit counterintuitive to standard test-driven development practices. So in which case, you'd make a test first, and then you implement your feature to meet that test. And then if it's good, then you're good. If it's not, then you're going to refactor and then test again, and then create more tests. ServiceNow kind of has a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation, because on the one hand, you would like to have things, you like to have tests in place so you can test your features, but for a lot of these things, you actually have to have the features before you test them. So, for example, if you want to make sure a certain user or user role can access a certain form, you have to make sure that user already exists, since everything is kind of passed by reference. It's nothing too big, but it does something that you might have to get used to, unless you're already familiar with developing in ServiceNow. It is definitely faster than manual testing, but the test runners can be a little bit slow. And I talked about being able to use parameterized testing, which speeds things up a little bit, or possibly even use take the amount of screenshots and kind of minimize that as well. So those are the disadvantages. There are a number of third-party solutions available, and those are pretty good solutions. And they use like recording-based functionality where you can kind of record actions on the UI, and then it'll create, it'll help you configure test steps based on the actions you actually did, the actual manual pointing and clicking. Some of those might be available at extra cost. I'm not quite sure what those are, but that's something also to consider to fill in the gaps. But let's talk about the good news. Again, it's built into ServiceNow and it's free, so it's fairly easy to get up and running. As Kritika mentioned, rollback is very, very important, and it's a huge advantage, so you don't have to worry about cluttering up your instance with test data that's unnecessary. The only data that will actually be persistent will be your test logs and results, and certain email logs will also be if you're using outbound emails. It's generally simple and easy. It's designed to be simple and easy to use, which is another big advantage. So, and for the most part, non-technical staff should be able to use it no problem. I mean, if you created a record in ServiceNow, you can use ATF. Testing templates and most recently filtering test suites make test creation and grouping a lot easier nowadays. So you can do that even faster. You can schedule your tests on the off time, which is another great advantage. And going back to what I said about the disadvantage of it not being a complete solution, and what the counter advantage to that is the fact that you actually can make custom test step configurations on your own. Like, for example, if you want to make sure emails are going out in your workflow, that's not actually currently covered out of the box. But if you use the scripting API, you can query your email logs to make sure it's in there, and then use that to validate whether or not stuff's coming in. If you're familiar with any other testing frameworks like Jasmine, testing libraries, they actually have support for that as well. So that'll make it easier if you have developers who are already familiar with that and would prefer to use that type of testing method. Going forward, they're just going to continue to add more features. So I think hopefully in the future there'll be a lot more coverage going forward. So in conclusion, ServiceNow's ATF should be implemented in pretty much any project, especially if you're just kind of getting started. It's good to start early, so that way you can kind of work out a good testing workflow, as well as continuously validate whether or not what you are customizing is functional, both initially and through regression testing whenever you update your instance. It'll provide peace of mind that functionality works. Out-of-the-box functionality is about 70 to 90% test coverage, according to customer feedback as of London, according to a ServiceNow summit from last year. If you're trying to get into testing, using ATF, the ServiceNow's documentation and training modules are especially good, and they'll be really good about helping you get up and running. Last but not least, the star of I think the show is the ROI on that. So it'll definitely save a lot of time. Most because it's free to use, so you don't have to do anything additional, and it'll reduce your testing workload and personnel requirements, so you can focus on what matters, developing extra features and maintenance. So I'm going to actually pass this back over to Kavi for questions, and thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Kritika. That was an interesting session, and I hope the audience was able to understand the importance of ATF. And once again, we would like to stress on the same point. It's free of cost. There is no additional licensing required for ATF, so you can make use of this feature. And Steve pointed out the ROI and how much time savings you can do through this feature. So we really feel that this should be completely useful to you, and that was one of the primary reasons why we wanted to do this session before Knowledge 19, so that you can also try to get some sessions from the conference. So we'll take up a few questions and then we'll move on. If there is any more questions, you can always reach out to us for this email ID. So it's info@aspices.com. You can always send us an email so that we will respond back to you and we can connect over a meeting. So the first question is, so ServiceNow ATF coverage is not 100% at the moment, and that's what you told. So could you elaborate more on any alternatives or solutions that can be used? I mean, they're asking for an out-of-the-box option. Steve, would you like to answer this? Steve, you there?
Oh,
hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think
the question is ServiceNow's ATF coverage is not 100% at the moment. So could you give us any alternatives or solutions that is that can be used until you get an out-of-the-box option in ATF?
Yeah, sure. So out of the box, I mean, with what you have out of the box, generally you should cover most of it. But you can kind of make workarounds where you can, for example, you can with the negative assertions, you can have tests, fail on purpose and just kind of flag those as tests that are okay if you're trying to validate something that you don't know if it's possible, but you know how to get to that point. Also, if you have technically savvy staff, you can create your own configurations, as I mentioned. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Steve. And the next question is the recording of the test run sensitive on the screen configuration? On how it is recorded, sort of comparing this with Jenkins, which is sensitive and sometimes cause error on the script. Would you like to answer this one, Steve?
Let's see. Give me one moment.
Can you see the question?
Yeah, I could see the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I prioritized it.
Thanks for highlighting. Yeah, so I actually have not personally been able to use the is recording the test run sensitive. Oh no, if you well, actually I guess the question is, what do they mean by recording of the test run? So I mean, test runs are recorded generally by just taking individual snapshots at the end. So they're not taking like any video or anything beyond static images. So I'm not quite sure what that is. But in terms of causing errors and being sensitive, ServiceNow does have whitelistable client errors. So you can flag those as that just in case something does happen, you can flag those as whitelisted, so you don't run into those in the future. So it'll just ignore them.
All right.
I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Steve. So, Kritika, can you answer this one? What environment do you create your ATF tests in, prod or UAT? Then presume you have to run in UAT. It is not clear how we do this.
Yeah. So it is not recommended to run the ATF in production environment, because just imagine if you are creating a priority 1 incident test case and you are running it, and it will actually create a record in the prod instance and it will send out the notification. So once the test case is completed or once it is done, it will roll back the record. So when the technician comes back and see the incident in the prod instance, it will not be available, which will create a chaos. So it is always recommended that you create and run the test case in UAT environment.
Thanks, Kritika. So is it possible to do volume performance testing? Steve, would you like to answer this one?
Yeah. So volume testing, it's possible in a way. If you have large sets of volume, especially in the back end through your database tables, and you have to query through all of those and just hundreds of thousands of records, you could set a threshold for timeout, so that you could kind of do it in that way. But aside from that, I'm not quite sure if there's any other anything out of the box or official out there. Oh, that's it.
Okay, Steve, thank you. So, I mean, we have a lot of questions here, so we might not be able to answer all the questions. So, we will take up one final question and we will answer the remaining questions email, and if it's possible, we can even set up a meeting and discuss this in detail. So, it's the last question is that in ATF during automated test run, there might be still some manual intervention needed in some cases. Would you like to take this one?
Yes, in some cases, manual intervention is required. For example, the manual intervention will be during the creating of the test case, but not during the test when we run the test case. So the manual intervention, I mean, we are going to create the test steps manually, but when we are running test steps, manual intervention is not required.
Okay. So I mean, someone asked that it will be you. I think there's some issue with that particular person. I believe he's not able to hear us. So I think I mean, you should be able to hear see the recording. I mean, it will be available in 30 minutes in Right Talk. So we are sorry about the audio issue. So you'll be able to see the recorded version where you can have a clear audio and go through the session. So I think we are running out of time, so we will answer all these questions individually. We will respond back to you. So if you have any more questions related to this, you can always reach out to us at info@aspiresys.com, and our website is www.aspiresys.com, so you can submit a form in that as well. Thank you very much for the session, Kritika and Stephen, and thanks a lot to the audience. And it's been really an interesting session. We hope that we were able to help you understand the importance of ATF and how you can use it. So for all the folks who asked questions to us, we will definitely answer your questions. We'll get back to you shortly. Thanks a lot. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.